to a new episode of Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Zack. Zack has had a lot of encounters with some interesting cryptids here in the last couple of years, and he was kind enough to come out here and talk with us. But before we do that, if you've ever had a experience and you would like to share it on an episode, you can send me an email. Send that email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, and we will get you scheduled for a future episode. Like us on the social medias. I typically just use Facebook, so you can find it, Tinfoil Tales on there. There is a paranormal convention coming up here in my neck of the woods soon. It'll be October 21st. I will be out there. I'll have some books. You come out and talk with me. I'll have my recording rig if you'd like to talk about the podcast or some of your experiences or whatever. We can record that if you'd like to. Be very interesting. I'm sure there'll be a lot of great guests out there. It's also free, so look up Para Unity 5. Again, that's on October 21st. If you would like to help the podcast, you can leave us a review. The higher the review, the more likely it is to be seen by other people. The more people that discover the podcast helps me out, so I do appreciate that if you do that. Sharing the podcast around helps as well, so word of mouth. We've kind of got this grassroots thing going, and it's been working so far, so it's definitely appreciated. But we're going to go ahead now and bring Zack on, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight. Zack, thanks for coming out and talking with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yep, pleasure's mine. So before we dive into anything, you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, there's a long laundry list, but I'll try to summarize it for you because I'm a man of many hats, is what people say. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I'm a born again Christian. I am a minister based out of Southern Illinois with Resurrection Ministries, and I am a servant of my Savior Jesus Christ. I'm a cryptozoologist of 18 years, doing that and paranormal investigations. I'm a farmer based out of Southern Illinois. Work for farming co-op based out of Marion, Illinois. I'm a cattle rancher myself on the side. What else? I'm a fourth generation professional wrestler. I'm an outdoorsman. I have my own outdoor brand with Duke Randall Outdoors. So I'm a man of many hats. That's a summary of me. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
A lot of hats, that's for sure.
Yes, sir.
What you said you're a man of the church. What
Mhm.
what drew you to that and then into the whole cryptozoology side of it?
Well, that's a long, long story. But I take it we got time, so I can give you the full deal. I grew up. My mother was a choir director and a piano player in the church. Grandpa was a deacon, and the my grandma, my grandpa, my mother, and myself, we sang together as a gospel quartet for many years. Whenever I was growing up, and then just some there was some time whenever I was a teenager that I got burnt in the faith by somebody that I trusted, and I kind of backslid. I went down a long road that lasted for about 7 years. Got my heart broke. There were some dark times there, between drinking. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Coming up September 2nd, I am 19 months sober from alcoholism. And basically, what I can equate it to is the parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15 of the New Testament, where the son he took his inheritance and he went into the world and he squandered it. And whenever the money ran out, he was all alone because nobody wanted anything to do with him. And that, to me, whenever the money ran out for me, figuratively, it was whenever I had two heart attacks within 3 years. And I was really up against it, health wise, and I was spiritually broken, because, I was trying to fill a void in my life and a hole in my heart that wasn't getting filled by anything that I drank or I smoked. And I went, and people say that, you find God in a church. That isn't true. Sometimes he'll come looking for you. And he found me in a funeral home at my great aunt's funeral, back in 2020, 2022. And I'll never forget that day. And I was sitting there on the aisle seat of the third row, with just looking at the floor, and I was listening to the pastor, Robbie Ray, give my aunt's eulogy. And I heard the Lord say, "My child, why?" And I sat there and I argued with God, and I said, you give me a voice to praise you and be a public speaker, and I'm using it for all the wrong reasons. I'm not worth to be called your son. I said, Father, I'm not worth it. And I didn't hear another thing, but he put a passage of scripture on my heart. And I went home to find my Bible, and it was in the bottom of my desk drawer, and I hadn't opened my Bible in 7 or 8 years. And I opened it up to Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 24. And I tell people a lot, I say, if you're not a believer, this would make a believer out of anybody. I hadn't opened my Bible in 8 years, and I opened my Bible. Nobody even knew where it was except me. And I opened the Bible, and it was right there to that parable in Luke chapter 15. And the ribbon marker was right there, and all the verses were highlighted and underlined right there. And I read those verses, and that became my testimony, to go and serve uh, Jesus, because he filled the hole in my life. And now I'm doing alcoholic and addict outreach and recovery based out of my church with Resurrection Ministries. I go and I have small group meetings. I go to churches and I talk to young people. I go and I act as sort of a mentor and a counsel for them. So that's where it started, back for me after I'd come home, to say the least. And I have been on fire for God, as on fire as I was for the world, because I'll tell you straight, the world will let you down a whole lot. God never lets you down.
Yeah. I'm not a very big religious person one way or the other. Like, I was raised in it. A lot of my family are
Mm-hmm.
that way, but I've got my own kind of feelings towards certain things. So I don't fault anyone for the religion and whatever they believe in. That's, if it works for them, that's great. I don't, like I said,
Well, my pastor put it to me the best way that I've ever heard it. It's not about a religion; it's about a relationship with with Jesus, because religion will get you killed. Look at the Pharisees and the heresies of Judaism. Whenever Jesus was doing his ministry to the Gentiles, he was going against Jewish customs and the Jewish doctrine. And then he came into Jerusalem, and they jailed him, they crucified him, and they were patting themselves on the back. They were, because it says it in the Bible, I can't remember where, but they were afraid that he was saying that he was the king of the Jews, and the son of man, and he was the son of God. he was God in flesh. They were going and saying that they were basically afraid that Rome was going to come in and take their positions of power, and they were conspiring to kill him. Religion will get you killed. A relationship is more important than religion, because
Mhm.
a relationship with Jesus will get you out of the ground.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I'm for the sake of the podcast and everything else, I know there's listeners everywhere that don't really agree with Christianity or Judaism or any sort of religion. I mean, I whatever it works for people. I mean, it works for me.
Well, don't get me wrong. Whenever those 7 years that I was, I mean, I was a heathen. I was going down that road, and they, I tried every religion. I tried paganism. I tried Islam. I studied these religions, and I even tried them out, but they didn't make sense to me. But Christianity did.
Hmm. Yeah,
It
like I said,
it, it checked all the boxes for me.
yeah, my family group, or I grew up with my family. They're Pentecostal type of denomination for church, and again, I'm a lot of my family are still that way, and props to them. But the whole church vibe itself, and it's not because of the teachings or anything about it. It's literally the people that make me not want to be around. Just because I, not to knock on everyone, but a lot of the people that go to church are free sinners that feel like they go to church just to say, okay, I've done my time. I've asked for forgiveness. I'm going to continue to be a hypocrite and sin the whole time, and then go back to church on Sunday and be the fake person that they think that they're the great Christian, holier than thou person. It's the
Well,
people.
I'll tell you this. Like my grandfather said this. My grandfather's 83 years old, and he's a very wise man. He said a lot of people go to church to be seen, and that's exactly how he puts it. And I tell him I've had it out with deacons before, because I tell them they're like, be sensitive to time and everything. And I said, last time I checked, this is the Lord's day, not the Lord's hour. You know, the Lord said, set aside a day of rest and worship. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, they're more worried about getting to the steakhouse before it gets too crowded.
I don't think I don't think you have to be in a church to have a relationship with the spirit. If it's
No,
you could,
but where it says in the Bible, where two or three are gathered, the Spirit is there.
mm-hmm,
And honestly, church is, for me, I have a very stressful job and everything. I run, and I mess with farming chemicals. I mess with anhydrous ammonia. I work around a lot of negativity, negative attitudes, a lot of the days. And in church, even Wednesday night Bible study is my recharge. I get to be around positive people. I get to be around uh, people that are going to be there for you and have your back, just because they love you. And that's the reason I go to church too. But not only that, I go to worship, and I go to leave my troubles at the altar. I stood in front of the church here 2 weeks ago, and I squalled my eyes out because these last 5 months has been rough, because my grandpa said it best. He says, if you're not doing something right for the Lord, and the world's not against you, you're doing something wrong.
yeah, that can be a whole lot of truth to that one. I always feel like when
Hmm.
you're doing something right, it seems like the world's against you.
Exactly.
But the original messages and stuff we'd exchanged, you talked about some encounters you had with some weird creatures, and that's what really piqued my interest. But knowing your religious background now, before we dive into your story, it kind of makes me wonder if your opinion on what happened has changed just from your religious standpoint.
Well, Ralph Waldo Emerson quoted it best. All things I have seen helps me to trust the Creator for all things I have not seen.
Mm-hmm.
And um, growing up, I had always heard stories of, big hairy men in the woods, ghosts, monsters, werewolves, things that fly and go bump in the night. I'd always heard about that growing up, but I didn't put no stock in it. Uh, but seeing is believing for me, and I have gone and whenever I reached out to you, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot in 18 years. I'm 28 years old now, and this all started back whenever I was 9 years old, back in 2004, and it snowballed from there. It started as a mission to go and find closure to what I had encountered whenever I was 9 years old. And it turned into a mission to prove that these things do exist on this earth. And it's not just in southern Illinois or in the Himalayan mountains or in British Columbia or Bray Road, Wisconsin. It's all over the world. People are seeing what they're seeing. And, you know, people, they say, that they're not real. And I say, well, you're insulting God, because these are God's creatures. I believe that, the Lord created all living things. And whether it's the birds of the sky, any animal that walks upon the ground or swims in the water, I believe the Lord made them. And, I believe that these things are as real as me and you, and I know they are.
If you want to dive into your first encounter, because you'd mentioned obviously there was multiple encounters with different types of these creatures. So if you want to start from the beginning, we can dive into the couple that you've had, and then afterwards, I'm going to kind of circle back around with some questions.
Okay, sure. Well, my first encounter, like I said, happened whenever I was 9 years old. It happened in Randolph County, Illinois, outside of Redbud, Illinois, on South Prairie Road. And um, my dad was with me. My dad um, and me had just come home from a baseball game at Busch Stadium. It was a night game, and it was right around midnight, 1 o'clock, that we were getting home. We were living with my grandpa Leroy at the time. And where this encounter took place, it's not like it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of I'm not saying that there's neighbors far off. They're literally right up against you on this stretch of road. My neighbor, my late neighbor, and my late cousin Leland lived literally maybe 100 feet away from the house in his house. And it was a August night. It was a clear night that night. I remember um, there was a full moon. I remember that. And the coyotes were moving a lot that night, because we almost hit two or three just coming down that main stretch of road from Redbud. And we go and we lived up on this hill, and out behind the house, maybe 50 yards behind the houses, was this big giant cornfield that was probably, I'm willing to say, maybe about 800 acres of just cornfield and no trees. We were in this garage that was built onto the house, and there was just the garage. There was the back door, the roll door up front, and there was a side door in the garage that went into the house. And me and my dad were in the garage, and he's fiddling with his keys, and I'm hearing coyotes howl. And I remember right as he was putting his key in the lock, I heard this guttural, it sounded like a guttural roar mixed with a woman screaming. And that was enough. I can remember to this day the power in the thing's voice and the decibels. I was hearing the window panes rattling in the window frames in the garage. and I literally about tore the hinges off of the door trying to get in the house, and it didn't click with me until maybe about 9 or 10 years later, and I'm on the computer at the house, and I'm just surfing through the web, and I go and I come across this audio recording, and it was not accurately the same, but it was sort of off to the side, resembled the Ohio moaning call that Matt Moneymaker recorded in 1994. And I remember I'm sitting in a rolly chair, and I kicked that roller chair out away from the desk, and I'm hanging out the door of the office, and I hollered for my dad to come in, and I rolled back across the floor, and I rewound the clip, and I played it for him. I said, "What's that sound like to you?" And he says, "Play it again." I played it again. I said, "Remember that night whenever I was 9 and we heard that sound outside?" He goes, "Yeah, that does sound like it." I had closure to what I believed was a Bigfoot. That was what I heard. And it started my journey into cryptozoology whenever I was 9. And literally up until that time, I spent as much time as I could in libraries. I was watching any kind of show on TV that I could find to learn about what is out there that I could have possibly heard. And to this day, I still swear I heard a Bigfoot whenever I was 9 years old.
Yeah. And what you say you're in Southern Illinois?
Yes.
I'm not real familiar with the southern part of Illinois. I'm assuming it's kind of similar to what's southern Indiana, where we kind of have hills and
It's a smelting pot of different terrain and environments. We've got, you'll go 10 miles uh, from the house, you'll see creeks, you'll see ponds, you'll see lakes, you'll see little rivers. Uh, you go another 10 miles, you'll see rolling hills, you'll see the Womble Mountain Range. You go back 30 miles the other way, and you'll see the Big Muddy River cutting through Jackson County. And we go, and it's a diverse and set of biomes, is the best way I can put it. We have cave systems, we have national forests, we have agricultural ground, we have strip pits that are full of fish. We have literally just in Union and Jackson County, they're uh, within even 20 miles of each other, there's 5 lakes that take up quite a bit of ground in the Shawnee National Forest. It's it's perfect habitat where if something wanted to hide, it could, because it's real thick timber in places, and it's it's just perfect for a big creature to stay hidden, and it wouldn't be seen unless it wanted to be seen.
yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking is kind of similar to how it was like southern part of Indiana, which again I'm not familiar with that way. I'm more from northern Indiana. But I know
Hmm.
down there they've got more hilly areas. I wouldn't call them mountains just because I don't think they're mountains, but it's not as flat farmland down towards the south as it is up this way.
Southern Illinois has got one place that we will argue all day long. Southern Illinois will argue that this thing is a mountain, but there's one thing that doesn't qualify it as a mountain. It's because it's literally 1 foot shy of being classified as a mountain. It's not a mountain classification is I forget how tall, but it's 1 foot underneath of it, and that's Womble Mountain. And the Womble Mountain Range is what we call it, is a series of bluffs that run along between Saline and Gallatin County, and they run all the way down to the Ohio River, where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi River. And they were caused by a massive earthquake, they said. And there's actually a place called Garden of the Gods that is actually the remnants of a inland sea that used to be here. course, that's what they say.
Yeah.
I wasn't there to see it.
Yeah. They
I'm
say
not.
a
I'm,
lot.
I'm not that old.
They say a lot of things, but
Yes.
sometimes the things they say don't make a whole lot of sense either. But that's neither here nor there.
No, I tell everybody I'm smart. I may be dumb. I may be born at night, but I wasn't last night. I'm country dumb.
I don't claim much of knowing anything when it comes to a whole lot of things. I was like, I'm just a guy with a microphone. I don't take what I say as anything more than a grain of salt at this rate.
Right.
But well, what about your next encounter?
Well, my next encounter, I've had more than what I told you about. I told you some of the bigger ones
Mm-hmm.
that I've told to people and everything because we would be here all night long. Um, the next real impactful encounter that happened, it happened in November of 2015. Um, I went and I'd started my crew, the Southern Illinois Monster Hunters, in 2015. And there's 6 of us currently to this day. And we're all born and bred Southern Illinois sons. We been doing since 2015 annual campouts. And there's only been 1 year that we didn't, and that's whenever coronavirus hit our shores, and we were doing the social distancing thing. And even then, we shut down operations. We didn't do investigations for an entire year because of it. But November 2015, I was camping out on my ranch that me and my family had. This ranch has been in our family for 3, 4 generations. Um, and my cousin, Big Country, his name's Kyle, and we call him Big Country. He came camping with me, and where the country that we were in, you really couldn't get in unless you had a 4x4 to get into a four-wheeler or a side by side, and we didn't have either. So it's about a mile back up this logging road, and I went and hitched up a flatbed trailer to a 1020 John Deere, and we drove up that pathway with all of our gear loaded on the trailer. And we get in there, and we were there for uh, 3 days and 2 nights over the weekend. And the encounter that happened, it happened the last night that we were there. We were camped out up on this hilltop, um, on the south end, not the southwest side of the property, and we were tent camping. Before we went to bed, um, we stoked the fire big enough to where it would radiate some of the heat back on the tents, and we were each of us were in our different tents. We had a dog with us that was a blue tick, and they're known for being hunting dogs, coon dogs, possum dogs, rabbit dogs, you name it. We had her, but she didn't want to sleep in any of the tents with us. But she would go and sleep out next to the fire ring to stay warm all night. So we're laying in bed. Uh, Kyle couldn't go to sleep right away, so he took a watch while I crawled into my tent and went to sleep. And then a couple hours later, he finally got tired and went to bed. Right around 4 in the morning, I hear something moving around in our camp. Well, I thought it was the dog. And I look over, and he'd stoked the fire before he'd got it back in his tent. And it wasn't blazing, but it was enough to where you could see a little bit of glow from the fire. And I rolled over, and I thought it was the dog going through our cooler. And I rolled over. I said, "Get out of there." And I see this thing stand up and take off. Well, at that point, I am wide awake because I've seen the shadow of this animal, and it wasn't our blue tick. Apparently, she had gone back to the house earlier in the night. Um, I'm laying there and I'm sitting there listening to hear if I can hear anything coming back into camp. And the whole time, Kyle's in his tent sawing logs. Just literally sound like a chainsaw idling, to tell you the truth, is how heavy he was going. I'm the only one awake in camp. And I'm about 30 minutes goes by and I start to doze back off. Well, I felt something hit my tent and I'm sitting there stirring, and next thing I know, something I can hear something brushing up against my tent wall, and I'm starting to come to. And next thing you know, I feel one side of the tent just raise up off the ground, and it was down where my feet were in the tent, and I'm starting to feel the ground moving underneath of my back, and I'm like, something's got me, and I scares me to death. I start screaming for this thing to turn me loose, go away, and I start stomping with my boots through the tent wall, and I hit this thing's legs, and I am not kidding you. You could kick a refrigerator and get more give out of one than you would kicking this thing in the leg. And it finally, I heard it grunt whenever I kicked it. I guess I kicked it and I couldn't see through the tent wall, but it hit, I looked back where my tent was as I was running, and I cut my way out of the tent after it turned me loose. And as I was running back, this thing had dragged me maybe 20 yards back into the tree line. And I ran back into the camp, and I woke Kyle up, and I dove in the tent with him, and we stayed up until sunrise, and we gathered our stuff, we put the fire out, and we went back to the house, and we have not camped out in that area again.
I don't know if I would have stayed out there the whole night. I would have gotten the heck out of there.
Well, we stayed up. It happened right around 4 o'clock in the morning is when it happened,
Okay.
and daylight wasn't too far off and everything. And I would have been too afraid because we didn't have any kind of firearms with us. So all we had was walking sticks and bowie knives, and I was uh packing well, I take that back. I was packing a 45 on the trip, a 45 revolver, but I was afraid to use it because you always hear the sayings, it's not the ones that you see you need to worry about, it's the ones you don't.
Yeah.
And I only had 6 rounds in that thing, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't even think these 45 rounds are going to put this thing down. So that's the reason we stayed there. We didn't run, and we didn't because we had to go because it's the 1020 John Deere that we had, and we had a loaded down trailer with all of our gear and our tents and our chairs and stuff. That thing had a road gear in it, but it would only go maybe 10 miles an hour. Uh, so we wasn't going to be going nowhere fast, and I'd rather us get out during the daytime where I could actually see what was going on around me than being out there in the pitch dark with just two little floodlights on the front end of that tractor.
Yeah. No, I understand waiting around, I guess, just to make sure you could see and get every stuff out of there. But I think the fight or flight fear would probably have taken over, and I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible.
I agree, but a researcher that I have an acquaintance with, Michael Cook, he says because he knows from his own experience, um, he was on These Woods Are Haunted, uh, and where him and his ex girlfriend and his friend was in the mountains of central Kentucky, and he could hear that say he says basically these things for every 4 steps that you take, they're taking one, and they will run you down before you can get away. It's just because they got such a long stride.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Something that tall. I'm almost 6'4", so my steps to the rest of my family, I can walk a lot quicker, even though I'm not trying to. I just have a little longer gait than most people. So I could imagine something that's a foot to 2 foot taller than me is going to have bigger strides.
Right.
Did you get a look at what it was?
I didn't. But we kept a logbook of everything that we did, everything that we heard, everything that we saw, everything that we found. We'd write a timestamp down in the logbook. It was literally just a legal tablet. And we would write down, say, 2:41 a.m. Heard wood knock to east of camp, approximately 100 yards. We would write something like that in there. Well, we get back to the house, and Kyle's already gone home, and I'm going through the logbook and everything, and then I get to the last night, and it says 2:30 a.m. red eyes on the north side of camp in the tree line. And I called him back, and we went back out there about a week later to collect my tent and everything, because we were too shook up to go back in there. It took a week to go and get the nerve to go back in there. And I asked him, I'm like, what do you mean red eye shine? He goes, I was on my watch because I couldn't sleep, and I look over and I hear something moving in the tree line. I look over, and in the glow of the firelight, I see these two big red eyes. And I said, where were they? And he walked over into the tree line to where he saw where the eyes were. He said they were up there, and I held my hand up, and I said, how high? And he goes, higher. I put my hat on a stick, and I said, just tell me when. He said, right up there. And I went, and we were on my his side by side, and I went and I got in the toolbox, and I found a tape measure, and I said, tell me when to stop. And he said, right there. And I looked at the tape measure, and it was measuring 10 feet 6 inches up the tree.
That's pretty tall.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to rationalize like height wise when you think of something like that. But if anyone knows like the height of a basketball goal from the ground to the actual rim is, I'm pretty sure, 10 feet. So
It's 10 foot. Yes.
so the eyes were around that. So you still have the top of it too. So you're looking at almost 11 foot tall.
Yes.
So perspective wise, out back, not that anyone could put this in perspective, but I have a 9 foot tall metal Sasquatch silhouette stuck to my barn, and it goes from the ground to almost where the soffit on the side of the barn is how tall it goes up to. So if the average barn is about that height, like that thing would be taller to where the roof starts, which is kind of crazy.
They get pretty big, I'll say that. And it seems like the further north you go, the bigger they get.
So a lot of the ones that I've talked to with people, they haven't fully seen. Some have seen some things, but not a lot of them have actually saw some. But size wise, it varies. And again, it's crazy to think that something that big can remain hidden so well. But I've got my own tinfoil hack beliefs as to why we don't hear about more of them or why they don't find bodies and stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. Again, that's just my own opinions. But it's the stories and everything that happened. They used to get wrote off. People were just kooks or whatever. There's way too many stories these days. And what's the point of someone spending all this time researching something, investing in something, looking for something, if it's not something they really saw? You know what I mean? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Oh, I agree. I mean, being a cryptozoologist is an expensive hobby. I'll say that much. I've probably spent maybe 20 grand just on equipment.
Yeah.
And that's between trail cameras, batteries for flashlights and cameras, trap cameras, SD cards, parabolics, night vision, infrared, camera equipment to film with, headlamps, the camping gear, even boots, just clothing to do it, like hunting boots and stuff like that, like I wear, or cowboy boots that I wear out in the woods. It's expensive,
Yeah.
and but why would anybody invest, great sums of money for something that doesn't exist
Hmm.
unless they're just filthy loaded?
I don't know what the point would be. Again, this is my own thought process, but I don't know what the point would be if the government's knowledge of it, kind of like with anything, they don't want to talk about certain things. But what would be the reasoning as to why something like this could be around and yet everything's being kept hush hush?
Well, that's I believe, and I've talked with this possible reason why they keep, things like Dogman and Bigfoot hush hush is because, look at like this. Yeah, I believe it was in Washington State whenever this very rare endangered basically owl was found. Well, these logging companies were logging this area up in the Northwest. Animal activists went through the roof, and they were picketing, they were uh, protesting, and they made these lumber companies that have been around for 40, 50 years go under within a week because they couldn't pay the bills because they couldn't get to that timber. I believe, that if Bigfoot or Dogman or any other cryptid that lives in the woods was declassified to actually exist, like they've been doing with extraterrestrials and unidentified flying objects, flying saucers, et cetera, uh, that people would lose their minds. PETA would be coming out of the woodwork, and they'd be going and trying to shut down all these logging places, these logging companies. Well, what do you build your house out of?
Hmm.
Wood. What do you build your barn out of? Wood. What do you go and use to go and put floor josses down in a big building? Wood. What do you build your roof with? Wood. What do you go and use to make paper? Wood. It would go and turn this entire country on its head.
Yeah. That's actually one of the points that someone else had made, and I agree with. Like one of the first interviews I did last year, that they think a lot of it has to do with the logging companies. But
Yes.
my other thing is, what is obviously they're seen in other countries as well, so there has to be some sort of agreement worldwide as to why they don't talk about it. Like literally, the countries can't ever get along for 2 seconds. It doesn't seem like, so. It's strange to me that they would come together in unison to say, "Well, we won't talk about these types of creatures." And then the other weird thing is they all agree on Antarctica, which that's a completely different topic. But I've always thought that was strange that we can't ever agree with other countries. Like America's always putting their nose in other things, whatever. And for some reason, weird cryptids are something that we agree with that no one can discuss about it.
And I mean, you go and I believe with the Yeti in China, it's illegal to kill one.
Yeah.
They actually recognize it. It's illegal to kill one, but they go and they designate national forests where you cannot cut down timber. And these national forests are vast too. And they'll go and they're like, you can go in there, you can hike, you can camp, you can cook, you can take your family in there, but you cannot cut down the trees. It's because they're making safe havens for these creatures. That and there's I wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory, but it kind of is, and it's a kind of a logical reason. Is that whenever I forget, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt, whenever he started doing the national parks, is because he was trying to make safe havens for these creatures, to where they, their habitats wouldn't be messed with.
I don't know if I'm 100% wrong, but isn't there a story of Teddy Roosevelt supposedly encountering one?
No, it was in his book that he wrote, but it was a fur trapper that told him about his encounter.
Okay. I remember to have thought something about Teddy Roosevelt was either saw one or something, so that makes sense.
Teddy Roosevelt hunted a lot of stuff too. I mean, even went to Africa, I believe, hunting Mokele and Bimbe.
Yeah. That's another topic that I would like to dive into someday with someone that's got some knowledge on it, but that's that's something that's always piqued my interest. I've always been a dinosaur fan, and there's all sorts of stories related to that. But on the topic of Africa, I always kind of think it's strange. And again, I mentioned this on a previous episode, but I've thought it was weird that, and again, I could be wrong, but I don't know of any stories from Africa of like Sasquatch type creatures. Obviously, they had gorillas and chimps and everything else over there, but you don't really hear of any human like upright walking hominids or anything over there that I'm aware of.
Let me think. There is two that I guess you could uh, classify in the hominid uh, appearance is the were hyena. Uh, it's supposed to be a shaman that will transform into an upright humanoid hyena. Then you have the tokolosh, which is supposed to be um, kind of like a zombie. If you've ever heard, it's small in stature, um, and it's made from when a witch doctor takes and he performs a ceremony on a corpse, a freshly buried corpse, and it becomes his slave, and he can go and make the Tokolos do his bidding to hurt people, um, and to cause property damage and even kill people. The Tokolos, there's one play. There's a reason that a lot of African tribes they put their beds up on bricks, so that way the Tokolos can't reach them in their beds because that's where a lot of their attacks happen. Um, but also, the Tokolos is supposed to have mystic supernatural powers where it can become invisible if it swallows a pebble or if it drinks water. Um, a lot of people they'll put out peace offerings with the Tokolos to actually get it to, leave me alone. You stay over there, I'll stay in my yard. They'll leave soured milk, they'll leave tobacco, just to name two things so that I know off the top of my head. And it's just weird. I mean, you'll find hominid creatures in all cultures.
Yeah, I was more or less just like the Sasquatch type of a creature, but the Togolosh that you're talking about reminds me of like the zombies from like the Haiti zombies or whatever, like the voodoo zombie almost. But
But
that's kind of
we were
I don't know what's going on. Weird sounds going on through my headset. Um, I've been having weird issues when we start talking about certain topics. I've noticed we had a dog man conversation with someone a week ago and lost connection. I mentioned a three-letter alphabet agency on another episode, and her internet completely shut off and she had to leave and go to a different. She got in her vehicle and had to drive down the road because the whole Zoom internet stopped working. So I don't know what's been
Mhm.
going. I don't know what's going on with the internet, but when I start talking about certain topics, I start having weird interference. But you mentioned something with like a dog man encounter and a possible skinwalker.
Yes. I'll start with the Dogman encounter. This one, it happened July 4th of 2017 with my brother. My brother and me were walking together. Um, Earlier in the night, me and my family out here in our little neighborhood, we'll go and every 4th of July for a couple of years now, we've gone and we've had a big firework display. And we'll have potluck, we'll fellowship with everybody, we'll all hang out, watch fireworks, and then everybody goes home. Um, my neighbor's two sons, um, who were in junior high and high school at the time, they went and told their mom and dad that they wanted to walk home. And they were going back and forth with their dad. And I said, listen, both you and your wife need to work tomorrow. You both got to be up early. If they want to walk home, let them. Me and my brother Josh will walk them home. And he said, okay. And they lived maybe a half mile away from where we were at my grandparents' house. Because me and where my grandparents, my mother, and myself, our houses are all out here on this little 40, 50 acre plot of land on this little country back road where our cattle ranch is. So we got the boys, me and Josh, my brother did, uh, together, and we were walking up the road. We stopped here at my place to go and get a 22 rifle because it was hot, and usually whenever it's hot out, snakes are moving, and we've got copperhead, we've got water moccasin, we've got and we got timber rattlers. 3 snakes that can kill you pretty quickly. So I took the 22 with me just to shoot snakes if we come across any. Well, we've got up on the main road, and some dummy was driving a big jacked up truck, and he about ran us over. We had to take the ditch to go for the four of us not to get run over. And we make it back to my neighbor's house and drop his two sons off. And I asked my brother after they went back inside, we're just standing there talking. I said, so how are we going to go home? It was night out, full moon. Um, I went and I said, which way you want to go? He goes, I ain't getting back on the road after that idiot almost ran us over. I said, fair enough. How about we cut across the field and go up through the woods and that come up behind the house? Okay. So we go and we start walking across the field, and it's clear night. The moon is big and bright in the sky, just really starting to come up. This was probably like maybe 9, 10 o'clock at night, or 11 o'clock. I can't remember the times. Um, we're walking. Oh, we crossed over the top of the hill, and we're coming down this little valley, and there's a creek that runs in this little valley between these two hills. And my neighbor's house is on one hill, and my house is on the other hill, and there's a creek between them. And there's these cattails that grow up real thick, along with Russian olive trees alongside this creek. And we get to the creek, and I said, well, we're not nowhere near back towards the main road, but if we go right, we're back on our road, and we can walk up to the house, or we can go left, Josh, and we can cross the creek and come up through the woods. He goes, let's go through the woods. I ain't scared, are you? And I said, no, I'm not scared. And I'd eat them words again, probably about maybe 10 minutes later. So we're walking up in the field up on the creek bank, and I'm hearing something that sounds like walking down in the water in the creek. Well, I heard a big splash, and I stopped and I said, are you throwing rocks, messing with me? He says, no. I said, okay. And I'm sitting there watching him out of the corner of my eye as we're just walking along the creek. And I hear a rock get kicked over in the creek, and I'm watching him as I hear it. And I put my arm out and I stop him with my forearm across his chest. I said, stop. I said, do you got your phone? He said, yeah. And he had one of them old Samsung flip phones that had the flashlight on it. It wasn't very bright. And I flipped open the phone, turned the flashlight on, and I start scanning into the tree line where these cattails and these Russian olive bushes are growing. And the creek where the bank is about 4 feet high above where the creek bed is. And I'm scanning from the left and I'm going all the way down to my right. And then right in front of me, maybe 10, 15 feet away from me, I see these amber colored eyes looking right at us. And you could hear a low growl, just like that. And Josh, I knew that he didn't see him, but I did. And he thought, he goes, "What's that noise?" I said, "It's a bullfrog. Don't worry about it. Listen, I tell you what. Let's cut back to the road. It's getting, it's going to be real dark in them trees, and we don't have very much battery left on our phones for flashlights. So let's cut back to the road where the street lights are." Okay. He goes right in front of me, and I kept myself between him and the creek because at the time there's 7 years difference between me and my brother, and I was 22, 23 at the time. And I'll let everyone else that's listening do the math because I'm not very good at math. Um, we're walking, and what was in the creek you would have thought would have actually, stopped and kept going the way that it was going. No, this thing had doubled back and was following us back up the creek. And I kept looking behind me. Pardon me. And you can look up, and the moon's high enough in the sky now that you can see the top of these cattails, and they're just parting, going across the top, and you can see them moving back and forth and parting. And I put my hand in my brother's back. I said, "Come on, let's move, going a little faster. I'm getting tired. I want to get home." And I'm trying to keep him occupied away so that way, he's not freaking out. And I could hear panting coming from in the creek. And it just sounds like, how best way I can equate it to is a big German Shepherd in the creek. And I look back and I see this hand come up out of the cattails and up down on the bank, and another one reach up, and it grabbed down a big old wad of grass in its left hand, and it pulled itself up. And I turned around and saw this thing come up out of the creek, but it kind of did a roll whenever it come up out of the creek. And I said, "Look, Josh, there's the road. Let's go. Let's go." And we started booking it to the road, and we got up on the road, and I looked back, and you can see the silhouette of this thing coming across the field, chasing after us. And we run uphill to where the street light was, and you could actually see our house. And I said, "Come on, let's go. First one across the street light is a rotten egg." And we took off and we ran across the street lamp, and we stopped. And I looked back, and he said, "Zack." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Look there." And right across the beam of the street light was this thing, and it would not come into the light of the street lamp. And this was literally maybe 20 yards from our house. And I had that 22 rifle with me. And at that point, I'm like, I got to protect my brother. And I pushed him behind me. And literally, I'm shaking right now just thinking about it, because it brings back, this is my brother, and if this thing comes after him, it's got to go through me, and I'm going to take a piece of him with me. And it didn't come into the light. It turned around and it walked back down the road. And whenever it got out of sight and I saw it go over the top of the hill and down the other side of the road, I grabbed a hold of him and we hightailed it to the house, and we come flying in the back door, and we didn't stop in the house at the back door. We were deadbolting doors. We were double locking the doors, using the chains on the doors to keep them shut. We were shutting and locking all the windows, pulling all the drapes and the curtains and the blinds and everything. And we were doing it like we were getting ready for a battle. And our mother's like, "What's going on? Are you boys okay?" And we're sitting there trying to go and actually piece together, because we're so freaked out by what it was. And my brother went and he said, finally got the composure, and I'm sitting there looking out the window. He says, "Mom, we saw a werewolf." And she said, "Oh, what?" And I said, "He's not kidding, Mom." And I'm still looking at the window. And that was our encounter. And our mother sat us down, and she told us that she had actually had encounters with creatures in the woods since she was a young girl. She said around 5 years old, and our mother is 61 now.
Did you guys happen to see the whole figure, like how tall it was and anything like
Well,
that? Details?
I'm 5'9", and my brother was shorter than me at the time, but now my brother is like maybe 6'4". Um, and this thing stood chest, shoulders, and head taller than him. And it was probably maybe about 7 feet tall.
Did you get a good look at the what the face kind of looked like? I know there's different descriptions. Like some say, like the German Shepherd look like a typical wolf look, and other ones. You mentioned something earlier about the hyena, but I've heard of other ones that look like a hyena in the face.
This thing, the best way I can describe what it looked like was a cross between, it had the eyes of the werewolf from American Werewolf in London, but it had the head of the werewolves from The Howling, as best as what I can put it.
So the Howling, I think they had more of the big pointy ears, didn't
Well, it had the head on it, but it didn't have the long pointy ears.
it? Okay.
No, they you had the fur texture, because the light's bright enough where I could actually see, what color the fur was, and it was kind of a gray black. That kind of reminded me of the hairstyle of the werewolf from American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sitting there shaking because it still, me and my brother, we still have nightmares about it, but he won't even talk about it. I'm the only one that'll talk about it.
Oddly enough, you mentioned the American Werewolf in London, and on the wall right above me is I have metal signs, like the little metal sign placard things, and I've got all sorts of ones up here. And there's one says the slaughtered lamb. It's basically it looks like the bar that they went into before they were attacked by the werewolf. It's the same exact sign, just on a metal placard.
That's weird. That's scary.
It's got the wolf head on top of a spiked axe looking thing.
Uh-huh.
But no, off air, I'll tell you about my experience. I've mentioned it several times already on these, and this podcast isn't about my stuff. I want to hear about everyone else's, so I'll talk to you about it off air. I think you'll find that interesting. But
Okay.
you said you had one more with like a skinwalker thing you thought of.
Yeah, I've had that one, yes. This is real touchy for me to talk about because I've been told not to, but these things are real, and you're not supposed to talk about them because it's like attracting a moth to a flame. Uh, but I have, I have the Lord on my side. I have not only the Lord on my side, but relics of my Native American heritage because I've got Shawnee Indian in me and my heritage in place that I am confident and comfortable with talking about it. Because these things offer protection not only from with what my ancestors used, but also because I have, the Lord on my side, um, protecting me. Um, Back in March of last year, me and two other researchers that are former members of my team, we were on a podcast, and somebody brought up if we thought that Bigfoot was a skinwalker. And our the guys that were on the podcast with me that was with the team, I'll leave them nameless. I'll just call them G and S. G is got Cherokee in him. He's half Cherokee, and his grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee woman. And he told them, he says, I am out of this conversation. And literally, whenever they brought up and they said the term skinwalker, all three of us started shaking our heads. No, we would not talk about it, but they were persistent about it. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to get there. They will not let this go. I'm just going to give them a short and sweet answer, and we're going to move on. And I started talking about it. G went and said, if my grandmother was still alive, she would slap the crap out of me for even talking about it. It's because, like I said, they're like Voldemort. You say their name and they're coming to you. Um, and S was talking about it, and he has, I believe, his there's some kind of tribe down where he lives in Louisiana that he has in his actual bloodlines. Well, about 2-3 weeks later, I get a call from G, and G says, "You know about where we were talking about on that podcast about the skinwalker?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I think I have one that's bothering me." I said, "How so?" He showed me a picture because he worked down on the river. Me and G used to work together down on the Mississippi River running anhydrous. And he showed me a picture of the biggest armadillo I've ever seen in my life. I'm not kidding. This armadillo was as big as a car tire, and it was out there in the field. And the story is that to become a skinwalker, you have to skin the hide off of an animal that you plan to transform into. And he showed me that picture, and he says, I've been trying to get a picture of it for 2 days. And every time I take out the camera, it disappears right in front of my eyes. And I got lucky. And we were discussing it amongst the three of us. G said, I've got to face off with this thing. That's the only way to get rid of it. And I'm like, well, do you need me and the boys to come up there, and be your backup? He goes, I can't. I have to face it one-on-one in hand-to-hand combat. And I told him, I said, brother, I'm praying for you. If you need anything, I'll come up there and I'll just sit in the house while you deal with this thing. But I'm here for you. Well, he got the things together to do the ceremony that he needed, and he has to face it the way his ancestors would, in hand-to-hand primal combat. And he called the thing out, and he ended up uh, fighting with this thing. He said the skinwalker was an old Native American man that he said he just loved to fight. And G's a big old boy. He's 6'6" and about 350 pounds. He's a former football player and a bouncer. And he said this old guy had him pinned down and was really putting it to him in the ribs and everything. I talked to G the next day, and he showed me, and his ribs were black and purple from where this skinwalker had just whooped the tar out of him. And I said, "Did you finish it?" He goes, "I did." He said, and I'm going to quote him, "I don't cuss or anything. I don't try to, but forgive me, Lord." He finished his medicine circle with the salt, and the skinwalker appeared, and he looked at him, and he says, "Come over here and get this ass whooping." And they went at it, but he said that the skinwalker wasn't alone. He said the coyote, which is a Native American deity, was right there. And he asked it, he says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm just here to watch, and I'm here to test the Irishman." Well, he told us that in our little group chat that we were talking about. And there's two people on our team at the time that were of Irish descent, but only one of the two of us, had Native American blood, and that was me. And we'd been having a plague of groundhogs around the farm, and this has been going on for years. And literally, it was getting to the point that we tried everything, and we haven't had no luck in getting rid of them. And so I called G, and I called a friend of mine who is of Shawnee and Cherokee descent. He's a medicine man, William Nighthawk. I contacted him, and I said, "Bill, I've got to face off with a skinwalker, and I've already laid down the challenge, but I'm scared, and I need all the protection I can get, both from Native American and Christian." And both G and Bill give me a list of stuff to get, and I'll tell you what the list was. It was natural sea salt, bay leaves, which is an old Irish ward off of evil magic protection. I got lighter fluid and 4 tiki torches to put at the north, south, east, and west of the medicine circle for all the points of the compass. I got 4 representatives of the 4 elements: earth, fire, air, and water, which was for earth, it was a buck skull. For water was a bowl of water. For wind, I had a dream catcher. For fire, I had another tiki torch, and they were set at the northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest points of the medicine circle. And I had my crucifix around my wrist, and it was customary for the wife or the mother of the brave that was going to face off with a skinwalker to come and paint their face. And my mother painted my face with the war paint of the Shawnee tribe, and it was red and black. And I was deathly afraid. Literally, I looked at my mother while she was painting my face, and I said, "Mother, I'm scared. I'm afraid I'm not going to come home." I was crying. I was so scared. I was trembling. And she anointed me with oil and prayed over me. And I loaded all my stuff, and I challenged the thing to hand-to-hand primal combat with a weapon of our choosing. No tricks, just a battle of strength and wits. And I went to the woods where I believe this thing to be, and I got into the creek bottoms where I was going to perform the ceremony, the fight ceremony, to face off with this thing. And I lit all four of my tiki torches after I drove them to the ground. I set my representatives of the four elements at each point on the compass, and I said the Lord's Prayer, and I prayed to God, and in reverence of my ancestors, I said the prayer to the Great Spirit. And, I want this thing gone. I'm going to do it by the book. And I took my salt and I made a circle all the way around those torches and all four stations for the four elements. And right as I finished the circle, I felt a dark presence behind me. And I turned around, and there was the skinwalker in human form. I had sage burning in my ammo box that I was using it like an incense burner. And I'd blessed and smudged all the way around the circle, and I put it in there to burn to purify the air of any kind of negative energy or magic. And I took my salt and I threw it outside the circle. I pulled my knife out of my hunting knife that I had gone and used to field dress many deer with. I took it out of my sheath and I flipped it upside down. And I looked at him and I said, "Are we going to stand around all night, or are we going to fight?" And about that time, the skinwalker came for me, and he wrapped me up around my waist. And I growed up, on a cattle ranch wrestling calves to ban them, to give them vaccinations in an open field and all of that. I grew up in a family of 90% of them are boys, and all we would do is wrestle each other at family gatherings. And I wrestled a little bit in high school, and he took me to the ground, and I'm laying down trying to get him off of me, just laying in any kind of thing I could get him. I was punching, kicking, elbowing, and biting and eye gouging to get him off of me. And I finally picked his arm in a double wrist lock, and I rolled out from underneath of him, and I put him in a kneeling arm bar. I put my knee down on his shoulder and started pulling on his arm, and I grabbed my knife and I stuck it to his throat, and I said, "What's your name?" Because the way to go and have power over a skinwalker is to make them tell your name, and to go and have them truthfully tell you what their name is. And I stuck that knife to his throat and I said, "Tell me what your name is." He said, "Scream, no." And I started wrenching on the arm and putting that knife further underneath his throat. And I said, "Tell me what your name is, or I'm going to rip your guts out." And he wouldn't tell me. And I took a hold of his wrist and I snapped his elbow. And I said, "Tell me what your name is right now, or I will kill you." And he told me what his name was. I said, "Swear that's your name." He says, "I swear it." I said, "Swear it on God." He says, "I swear on the Christian God." And I turned him loose. And I said, "You're free to go, but don't you ever come back don't you ever harass my family or my friends or come on my property ever again. I said, and you swear it to God. He said, I swear to Jehovah. And he turned into a groundhog right before my eyes, and he left. And right there, as he left, it started to rain, and you could feel all the evil and the negative energy and the evil energy just wash away from the area. And to this day, we have not had a problem with groundhogs ever since.
You mentioned evil. This is kind of where I said I'd circle back around with the whole, with your religion and everything. What do you think the dog man and these skinwalker things actually are, as far as on the spectrum? Because a lot of people think the dog man are like an evil entity.
I do believe, that these things are flesh and blood, because that was just one of my encounters. I won't go into the other two because they, um, was one time that I almost hit one with my truck, and then one that I saw on the way home, and it had roadkill in its hands. Everybody's heard 100 stories and encounters and testimonies like that. But what I saw was a predator that gave chase, all because, we ran from it. I don't see it as being an evil entity or anything, but I believe they are flesh and blood. Skinwalker, on the other hand, is actually pure evil, because the purpose of a skinwalker is to hurt somebody as slowly and painfully as possible. And the only way to exercise a skinwalker from your life and your land is to face one and actually beat it and make you tell you its name. Because if you lose, you will be buried. It's a battle to the death or to submission. And the way to become a skinwalker is witchcraft. It's you have to skin the hide off of the animal that you intend to use, and it's usually the more dangerous the animal that the skinwalker chooses is how much more powerful that the skinwalker will be, because they actually gain the powers of the animal of the hide that they're using to transform into. And not only that, it's pure evil, because to become a skinwalker, you have to kill a member of your own family.
Is that just from, I'm not up to date on the whole skinwalker lore as far as with Native Americans and stuff. I know there's different versions throughout different tribes. Is that kind of one of the things that they all do agree upon, is the killing of the family member?
Yes, I've talked to Ojibwe, Cree, Iroquois, Shawnee, Blackfoot, Cherokee, and Seminole and Navajo Indian Native Americans, and they all say the same thing.
I interviewed someone recently, and I believe it was Navajo, and we kind of dabbled here and there, and even it is just the topic itself is not something that they ever want discussed.
No, it's taboo.
Yeah, they don't like talking about it. No one wants to talk about it. It is one of those things that is iffy on talking about, but I mean, like I said, I'll elaborate more on my encounter here in a few minutes, but there's definitely something to it, and that's kind of what's got me digging into where we are right now. But other than that, like, I don't know where to, without going too far into subjects that I don't want to dig into. And I know you don't want to bring up the things either. I just don't know, like, how does someone know if it is a skinwalker that they're dealing with?
It'll be you'll know it. Yeah, it's just you know it's undeniable what it is. It may take you a while, but once you put two and two together, you'll know what you're dealing with.
That's the thing. Like I said, I've talked with several different people. I know people say shapeshifters, they say skinwalkers are the same thing. I don't necessarily know if they're one and the same. They kind of have the same, I guess, physicalities of being able to change from whatever they want to. But you said yours was a groundhog. Would that mean that it had to skin the groundhog to become the groundhog, or once it's able to take a form, could it just take any form it wants to?
I believe that they go and they take the form of any animal, even after the initial ceremony to become a skinwalker. That they would go and you know um, skin other animals to attain their form and their powers, their strength, their senses, their instincts, and the like. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. It
Mm.
has to, in order to take the shape of whatever it's taking, it has to actually skin that animal.
Yes.
Now, is it just animals, or what if it was able to do that to a person? Is it able to take the form of another person?
I'm not too sure about that. I do know that a skinwalker is capable of mimicking another person's voice of someone that you know, and that's usually how it happens because, um, you know, like for this was going on for like years that this groundhog infestation was going on before I faced off with the groundhog, and I'd be out in the woods, just walking looking for like I'm a deer hunter. I hunt for deer sheds, and I would hear my mother's voice call my name, and I'd get on the cell phone and I'd call my mom, and I'm like, "Hey, are you at the house? Did you call for me?" And she'd say, "No, I'm like in Carbondale, and Carbondale's 35 miles away."
It's interesting you mentioned that because the episode that I think it comes out here either next week or the following week. I've recorded, and again, it's with he was from Texas around San Antonio, and I'm pretty sure he said he was Navajo. I'd have to actually go back and re-listen to our conversation, but his wife at the time, they were at they had property. It was her mother's property, and they were leaving, and she heard her mom calling out to her, but it was coming from the woods. So she went back inside to see if it was her mom, and it wasn't. So she came back out to get back in the vehicle, and she heard it again. He never heard it, but his wife did. And then I don't know the time frame of how much longer it was, but they ended up living out there. They had he said a single white put out there on the property. So again, it was a lot of acreage. And he woke up in the middle of